Today I'm going to talk about one of the things that gets in the way of personal development, spiritual growth, and more importantly, loneliness and the feelings of isolation. And that thing is desensitization. I'll be going over some of the obvious things and maybe some of the not so obvious things, so stick around. So, greetings, dear ones. I am Zach with Consciously Awesome, and welcome to this conversation about getting out of loneliness and isolation and breaking through some more barriers of being connected with life and everything and everyone all around you. And let's go over some of the more obvious ones. I know for myself, growing up as a young boy, I was exposed to a lot of violent content when I was younger, even if it was cartoons and they were fighting and things like this. And it wasn't until my much later adult life that I would say that I realized, oh, this stuff really does have an impact on how I connect with the world. And so one of the first things that I would put forward is violent content. And I feel like over time, it actually dampens and diminishes and desensitizes the sense of oneness or the sense of connection or the sense of just understanding that the human beings and the plants and the animals around me, there's a connection and a quality of that connection and a respect for life and what that is, that gets diminished over time. It gets numbed. Part of this whole process of being desensitized is to lose one's sensations, our feelings, our senses, all five senses, not just a couple, but all of them become diminished and dampened, and that helps create that feeling of loneliness and isolation and getting in front of connection. So that's what's one of the more obvious things to me was growing up looking at watching cartoons and just like cartoons fighting on the screen, and I wanted to grow up and be a martial artist, which I was, and I was in the army and all sorts of stuff, very very violent way of life, or training for violence, that is. Not to say there's nothing wrong with knowing how to defend yourself, but we're talking about desensitizing our senses. And when we desensitize ourselves, when we numb, it's really desensitization is like this numbing agent. It dampens one's ability to feel and sense the real connection one might have had when they were younger. Like, say, a child. The child carries this connection with them. It is not conditioned out of them. So this is one of the biggest things and most obvious to me, is that this violent content, I don't believe, this is my personal position on this, I don't believe violent content will kind of like prime people to be more violent than they normally would be. I would just say that it desensitizes that connection of committing violence, so people can commit more violence instead of like causing it to happen. I think there's more underlying things underneath that. So violence is one of them. Another thing is music. Hearing repetitive messages over and over in our head and what music we listen to. I also feel like that's part of being desensitized to numbing ourselves, so we're not as sensation. When we're full of life, we're full of sensation, we're full of all sorts of emotion, especially joy and happiness and playfulness. So all of it gets diminished, and when we go through this desensitization process, so we got violence, we got music, then we have substances. I would say that technology, our current way technology is created and it is designed to be used, also puts up a barrier of being desensitized to the world around us and creates a part of this numbing thing. And that's because it's been said that our brains only have the capacity to kind of care for or maintain about 100, I've heard a couple different numbers, but it's about 144 to 152 of social interactions, because we're tribal. We live in tribal animals. We're tribal animals, and that's what this body was designed to do and be, and the environment was to be around. And when we're getting so much information from so many more beings, right? You got your, first of all, you got all your social feeds, and then if you watch the news, you got local news, you got your country's news, and then you got global news. And so like there's just this overstimulation and saturation of information that has to do with people. And that helps desensitize and numb the human, right? To numb our personalities, because we actually don't have the capacity innately wired into us to manage all of that information about other people. And so this creates this numbness, this desensitization, so it allows us to easily step back in life. And then let's get into some more of the not so obvious ones too. Work. I think if you've ever heard the word workaholic, or the term, or maybe you've known somebody like that, or maybe you yourself have been a workaholic, putting work before everything else is also another form of overstimulation, and it's not a balanced way of living, and that helps desensitize and numb or push down all of the things that maybe don't feel so comfortable that one might need to confront. So that one's not as obvious as the being a workaholic or working too much. And this kind of leads into avoidance behaviors. And avoidance behaviors are very similar, but I feel like they have a different function, or they have a different way somebody moves into them. It's more about avoiding than it is numbing. And in the act of avoiding, one becomes numb. So, or number rather. Now for some of the ones that are, in my opinion, very subtle, and one of them are the stories we tell ourselves. I'll say that one again. The stories we tell ourselves. That's one of the ways that I feel like we can desensitize ourselves from the world. So it's very tricky, it's very sticky, it's very sneaky. But if we perhaps experience a lot of stress, or a negative experience with relationship or a relationship or whatever it may be, maybe there's some trauma, maybe there's some violence that happened to us, that kind of thing, then we can start to have this narrator or this story in our head, and the more that runs, the more that comes to the forefront and pulls us back again into that numbing sensation. And really, it's blocking us from this natural connection we would have had as a child, right? And all of the overwhelm that comes with this repetitive narrative that just keeps looping in the mind, and eventually that loop it moves a little bit further back in the brain, so to speak, and it gets wired in there, so it actually just becomes automatic. We don't have to hear it anymore, but it doesn't mean that it's not running in the background, right? And so, to me, one of the more trickier, sneakier ones is the stories we tell ourselves about the world. I don't know about you, but I know I've worked through a lot myself, and a story that I may have told earlier in life really shaped how I viewed the world, right? We call this a paradigm, a worldview. So if our worldview is very limited, right, it's based on our experiences, and that this isn't good or bad. Like, this is good. This is your biology and your psyche working to keep you safe, right? But there's something called too much safety, in my opinion, and then we lead into loneliness, isolation, and suppression, and depression, and repression, and there's at a point, some point in time we need to come out of this little shell or armor or the prison that we create for ourselves with that. So we got music, we got violence, we got work, and we have this little narrator going on in our head, and once it goes on autopilot, it's really hard to shift and change, and it just becomes kind of this permanent structure until it's not anymore. Some more of the obvious ones. I know I mentioned technology as well, but substances. Some substances get in the way of a lot of that as well, because we are overstimulating in some capacity or whatever. Maybe that's escapism. Maybe it's just something you like. I know I like coffee and caffeine, but that still can be overstimulating for my nervous system, and it creates this barrier or this sense dampening response to the outside world instead of something that is more like a harmonious feeling within the body. And so we have substance abuse as well. So there's a lot of things, especially in the modern world today. There's so many distractions, and there's food. That was another thing. Sorry. So we have distractions and we have food, right? So salt, fat, and sugar. Those things are also desensitizing us in our taste, in our palate, and if we have too much of those things, right? So how do we get out of all of this? There's so much kind of like available to us easily and effortlessly for the most part, that it's really easy to desensitize ourselves and maybe not feel the connection that you would normally have felt when you were a child with other people. Or, let's take it even further, if you want to really grow and expand your awareness and your consciousness and really tap in, let's move that out to nature. Let's move that out to animals and plants and the sky and the cosmos and the stars, and the water and the fire and the earth and the air. Like there's so many, this goes a lot further than just human to human connection and getting divine inspired messages, right? Being able to hear those, being able to sink into them easily. We need to be full of life and full of sensation. The sensation is a superpower. I feel like, to me, your body, in the spiritual world, it is said that you are not your body, that you're a spiritual being having a physical experience. I agree this is true, but I also feel like the way I see the narrative or the interpretation, the people I've come in contact to with this a lot, is that means the body doesn't matter. And I would argue that your body is the most miraculous, magnificent piece of technology you will ever care for and steward. And when it's completely online, when it's full of vibrant life energy, when your cells are dancing in harmony because you have so much zest for life and to be out and to go about and do whatever it is that you're up to, and you're full of sensation, all of your senses and your feelings and your emotions, everything's online, that's full of life. And desensitization is the opposite. It's numbing. It's like a little death. So how do we restore this? Well, one of the tried and true methods is abstinence, right? So fasting, creating lots of space in between the stimulus or in the being, in the body. So that's what I have to offer you today. So maybe if there's one thing in your life that you know that you need to, or you could because you want to, put down because you want to be full of more sensation and be more connected, be less lonely or feel less isolated from the world, the natural world and people. Maybe there's just one thing in your life. I don't say, like, some people can go on a crash diet and fast on a lot of things, but maybe it's just doom scrolling. Maybe it's the news. Maybe it's a substance, right? Maybe it's too much TV or too much internet, whatever it is. I just invite you to pick up one thing, take it down a notch, and not have it for 30 days. Maybe even just try a week and see how you feel. See if there's more energy, if you have more energy coming back into your life, into your body, into your awareness. I know for myself, I was trying to repair my phone. I kind of have an older phone, and I broke the battery in it this past week, and I don't have a spare phone to plug in the SIM card to, so I just had to wait for a new phone to come in. And it was about 6 or 7 days. And day 3 or 4, I noticed, I was like, oh man, I feel so much better that I'm not even like on my phone a lot, but I just felt so much better because that thing wasn't around me, just pulling my energy away from my consciousness. So I had more energy, more sensation just to move about my normal day. And I was like, oh man, it felt so good, even for a week. So I hope that helped. I hope you can take something from this and pull more sensation, more life force back into you so you can have a better quality of life. And I leave you with that.